Please welcome Ralph Langner to the S4 main stage.
Who in this audience thinks that asset owners are doing enough when it comes to OT security? Raise your hand. Nobody? That's what I thought, but I gave it a try anyway. Well, let's think about it. Isn't that strange? After all these various wake-up calls that we have seen. We have seen Stuxnet, we have seen 2 cyber-physical attacks in Ukraine, and recently we have seen the Triton attack on a safety system. But still, asset owners, in our estimation, are not doing enough. Isn't that strange? Well, it tells us one thing: wake-up calls don't change a thing. Wake-up calls are irrelevant. They won't make our point. And when I discovered that a couple of years ago, after Stuxnet, I was pretty much shocked or disappointed that Stuxnet didn't change anything for the asset owners. It did for parts of the US government. So what did I do? I thought, well, maybe it's a good idea to try to educate political decision makers and influencers. So I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., talking to think tankers, talking to people in various government organizations such as DoD. I talked to people from the US Senate. I talked to people in the White House. Here you can see me with the great Jim Longley, former congressman from Maine. But 2 years later, I realized that still didn't change a thing, or at least not enough. Although I learned one thing, that there are some incredibly smart people in Washington, D.C. But certainly that was not enough, not the outcome that I had expected. Dale took a different route. I think Dale shared my feeling that after Stuxnet, nothing was happening, nothing was going on. So Dale started his project Basecamp. In my interpretation, this was an effort to name and shame OT vendors for their insecure by design products. And if you have followed what Digital Bond did, they also abandoned the effort, I think around about 2 years later, so there are no further base camps going on. And I believe that both of us ended up with the feeling, well, you're just trying to boil the ocean, so that's not worth pursuing. And then there is Joe. Joe refers to a real person, but I won't identify him because there are lots of Joes. This is basically the majority of the OT security community. They just pursued their scare tactics, like we're doomed and you're seeing more and more cyber physical security attacks every year. And that also didn't quite work. And you can even explain why it works very poorly, because what the argument basically boils down to this. You're trying to focus the attention of the asset owner to potential cyber physical attacks in the future against specific corporation or against critical infrastructure, against the nation. And you tell the asset owner, well, if you give me your money today, you won't experience those attacks in the future. And as experience shows, this is not very persuasive. If it would work, if scare tactics would work, then the biggest fearmonger had the most profitable business. And apparently that's not the case. All of this leaves us with a cognitive problem, because we are experiencing a significant difference between expectations and reality. Think about it. Why don't OT security products and services go viral? Can they go viral? Or is this just impossible? Think about it. Why do users want less OT security rather than more? And at the same time, how come that absolutely non-critical products take off, go viral, and change our lives, like social media? Do you have a good answer for that? Well, just to give you an example, there is this company called Snap. Just in case you don't know about their service, it's called Snapchat. I would guess that most of you are aware of what they are doing, but I had to look that up. So if you're like me, or maybe just because of age, or you don't use social media that much, that's a service that allows you to share pictures, and the picture just vanishes after a couple of seconds after that you have seen it. Okay? Who needs this service or this product? Do they really need the product? I would say no. And how come that this company has arrived at a market valuation of $20 billion? And our stuff, our products, we need to drag users, we need to drag customers in order to use them. So can all products go viral? Well, anyhow, you answer that for yourselves. But one thing is for sure, the default answer to this cognitive problem has always been, just think about it for a second. What is the answer to that problem? How do we justify that? They don't get it. And that's probably the most silly answer that you can come up with. That you think you're so much smarter than your users and your customers, so the only reason why they don't use our stuff can only be that they don't get it. They are not smart enough. And you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of every other failing startup. I got aware of that last year when I founded my own software startup. And since I try to approach things intellectually, I did some research, I read books about startups and why they fail, and I came across the works of these three fellows that you see here. And they make this point that if you don't discover your users and their needs, then you're pretty much lost. So these fellows have created what is called the lean startup movement, and I think a lot of what they have come up with can be applied to what we are doing in OT security. Because again, if you look at it from a distance, it would almost appear our community and all the various vendors that are represented by this community, it would almost appear like a failing startup. You're thinking too much about our big ideas, and we're thinking too little about all the end users. So, talking about end users, this is a statue of a user of OT security products, as you can see right away, right? She doesn't get it because she's blindfolded. She doesn't see your risk reduction. And if she would see it, she probably wouldn't even care, because she has other things to do. Think of her as, for example, an engineer. Think of her as an IT administrator. She doesn't get it. She cannot see your CIA versus AIC. She cannot see your cyber kill chain, etc., etc. But you know what the problem is? She has a sword. She's carrying a really big sword. And that means she can kill your OT security effort. But you can't kill her use case. So she's more powerful. And you know how she judges if she really follows through with your procedures and using your stuff? She is doing her own judgment based on the relationship between waste and gain. And now we come back to this term of lean. It ultimately refers to lean manufacturing. So what you do in lean manufacturing, you try to reduce waste for the customer. Waste is things like implementation cost, but it's also any inconvenience that your product or procedure causes for the end user. Okay? Can we think about inconveniences that we introduce for end users of OT security products? Hell yeah! I can think about a lot of inconveniences. So every single time you mess with their use cases, like the way how they are supposed to exchange files, documents, etc., with vendors and contractors, anytime you do that, you have a good chance of pissing the user off. And this usually leads to product or procedure rejection. And those end users, as most of you will know, are very clever in just working around your OT security efforts. On the other hand, if you can demonstrate some gain, some short-term tangible gain, you really have a chance to turn things around. So this is how we get user acceptance. We have to provide some gain for them. And don't think about and engineering use cases as such, like we don't necessarily need to make them more productive, but just think about that part that relates to OT security in the near sense. How can we really make this fun to use? How can we make this OT security procedure more efficient? So this is something I suggest that we should focus on much more than we did in the past. And this leads us to my concept of lean OT security. I would define it like this. For asset owners addressing OT security, lean OT security is an approach aiming at making OT security more efficient. Let's pause here for a second. For asset owners addressing OT security. And that is exactly the population that Dale Peterson has talked about a couple of minutes earlier. For those who want to try. I think this is our most important target group, those who want to try, and there are lots of them. But you know what our problem is? From those who try, so many fail. Way too many OT security efforts fail in the execution phase because the users find it too costly, too much waste, etc. So we are only focusing on those who try. We don't address the late majority, we don't address the laggards at this time. And for these few, these chosen few, lean OT security is an approach aiming at making OT security more efficient. So we no longer focus on making them more secure, reducing their risk. We just consider that already taken care of. We don't argue with the specific concepts or products or procedures that they are using. We do focus on making the implementation more efficient. Different from existing standards for OT security, lean OT security focuses on reducing cost and inconvenience associated with the implementation and execution of OT security efforts by soliciting cooperation from end users. And I think this is another very big and important difference to what we have discussed so far over the last couple of years. We are actively soliciting cooperation from the end users because when it comes to the use cases, they are the experts. So we no longer pretend that we are the experts that everybody has to listen to. We are interested in their everyday life, in their use cases. They are the experts. And that's what I call authority reversal. We really need to work with the end users. And just think about yourself or think about other people in the community that you know. Are you really familiar with those end users? I've seen cases in my consulting career for the last 20 years where the OT security and certainly also IT security people, they had never met the engineers before that OT security project that they had started. So that is something that we want to shift. We want to solicit the advice from the end users. It's a bottom-up approach. It's about efficient execution. It's not about high-level concept. We have had too many discussions about the high-level concept. We have way too many standards. If you are an asset owner today, you already have to invest a lot of effort just to identify which of these damn standards you really want to focus on, because you got to make a choice. We have more than enough standards, so we consider that a done deal. Just pick the approach of your choice. But lean OT security is about execution, efficient execution, not about those concepts. And then we also bring in the idea of agility. Gaining momentum is essential. This is also where you can see most OT security efforts stall and fail because a year down the road in the project, they still don't have any results to show. And that's bad. That's a recipe for failure. Just try to arrange your procedures, your programs, your projects in a way that you can demonstrate success within 6 months. And those results should be tangible efficiency gains. Thank you very much.